All right, it is time to start. So welcome, thank you for coming. This is the Illumina joint Leganto course cleanup webinar. I'm Greg Argo, University of St. Thomas, coordinator of the working group for the Illumina side. And presenting with me today, we're going to be Peta, Jamen, and Yuan, and we'll allow them to introduce themselves a little bit later on. A little housekeeping, just a reminder that the session is being recorded, will be posted online. We will take questions at the end, but feel free to add questions to the Zoom chat as we go. Also, everybody's been muted when they entered. Unless you're speaking, just please mute your microphone to reduce interference. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and do my part, which is basics of deleting with the course loader in Alma. So I'm the Associate Director for Access and Digital Services at University of St. Thomas as well. Some requirements right off the bat for using the course loader are having an SFTP definition in Alma. It's something you set up with your IT department. We'll look at that in a second. Also having the course loader integration profile. You could, we'll look at that in a second as well. And then also you need a file with the courses that you want to delete. I'm going to jump out of my presentation and let's go look in the Alma configuration quickly. So here's where you would find the SFTP definitions. It's under General and External Systems. And zoom mine in a long way so that you can't see my key. It's at the bottom. Almost had an accident. It showed the whole thing during the last webinar. Anyway, this is all stuff that your IT and network services type people should be able to understand and help you set up. And you probably already have it set up if you've been doing a student information system load, other things like that. But we do understand not all Leganto users are using course loader to put courses into Alma. I think the other thing that we were talking about was an integration profile. So I'll look at that too while we're over here in the configuration. So course loader is one of the types of integration profiles you can make. We've only got one here at St. Thomas, but you can make as many of those as you want for different sorts of work that you're doing, different methods that you're using. And Peta has a few, so I'll let her talk about that a little bit later. This is pretty basic. Your SFTP connection has to be set up first because this is required. And I've got a few different options. Actions is where the real configuration happens. And for deletions, we don't worry about very much of this. This is mostly for adding, editing, or rollover. But this is one piece right here that you do really have to pay attention to when you're deleting is whether or not you want to also delete the associated reading list when you delete the course. If you wanted to, you go ahead and check that before you ran it. If not, obviously leave it empty. And then also this input file path is something that when you set up the SFTP definition, you'll have some sort of file path that you've defined, and you're going to want to put that in there so that everything runs. Finally, when you've got your file up on the SFTP, you end up hitting a run here. So I may have gotten a little bit ahead of myself, but let's go back to the PowerPoint presentation. So I did talk about this, like strategize a little bit beforehand and know what you want to do with the reading list as well as the courses you're deleting in case there's both. In my case, I'm deleting courses that have no reading list, so I would not leave that checked, but I guess it wouldn't matter one way or the other. But there are other options, especially when maybe you're going back and trying to clear out things past a certain year that you don't want in the system anymore, and so on. And then just from the online help, to put a little emphasis here, if the operation column is set to delete, the associated course, which is identified by the code and section ID, is deleted from Alma. So it's very important that you're paying attention to the operation column before you're doing anything. If you don't put delete in there, it may do something else to your courses, and I ran into that when I was practicing. So finally, the delete file itself. You're going to want to be working with a tab delimited text file with mandatory columns in this correct order. You'll be able to find this in the online help. I modeled mine after our successful course loader add file. So that's what I would recommend, but you could also see an example file in the online help under configuring course loading, and they link to in a file that you could use that has the correct headers. And then also, according to documentation, the only mandatory fields are course code, course title, processing department, operation, but I haven't had luck with that on the delete side. So you'll see when I show you a little demo that I'm using basically all the data that I'm pulling out of analytics and just leaving it in there. So where do you get your file? You can export a file from analytics. We'll look at that a little bit in a second. You could also use a homemade file if you're not doing course loader, but you wanted to for deletes. Or you could use course loader for ads and use a homemade file for deletes. Mix it up however you want. Just a little caveat to be careful not to delete test and sandbox courses. That's why we kind of go over ours with a fine-tooth comb, because there's some weird ones in there. Maybe people haven't gotten around to creating a reading list for them or something, or they've been doing some testing and switching the association and so on. So we don't want to delete those courses and make our Canvas admins add them again. Be meticulous. So course loader will produce errors unless data is exactly how it wants it, and that's absolutely true. I tried many times and ran into some problems, and I'll talk about those problems, so maybe you can avoid them, but the course loader will reject them and give you events on the report that you can check out to try to make your file a little bit better. But then once you get the correct codes and values that it's looking for, it runs really quickly and pretty smoothly. And I would advise, once you establish a method, to go ahead and go into analytics and soup up your own analytics report so that it's exporting in a form that you can just kind of take and modify a little bit and then use in the course loader. So here's what I'm going to do in my demo. It's about 5 easy steps. You run an analytics report, you edit this analytics report into a delete file. There's a few problems here I'll talk about. There's a leading zeros problem where Excel likes to remove those, and then there's a processing department code problem that happens to me. I'm not sure it will happen to you, but I'll tell you about that too. Then once you got your file ready and you're confident, you place that on the SFTP, run the integration profile, which is the run button at the bottom of it, and then you can check results in Alma under monitor jobs. So I'm going to jump out into Alma and give this a go. So let's see, I think my analytics is probably still alive here. Yep, okay, we're good. So you try to run a list in analytics of courses that have a reading list with null value. You don't get any results. So what we've got kind of going is a 2-step process where first you create an analytics report with courses with reading lists, and then you create one that has a dependency on the analytics report that has reading lists. So I'm not good at explaining it, but let me show you the reports. So this is a list of classes that have reading lists. Okay, and my logic I used there was just not null. And then the real magic happens back here at the catalog, in this other one where you can tell the report, include all of these. So these are all the different data elements I was talking about earlier that you have to have in the right order. And then also, we're saying a course code is not equal to any of the course codes in this other list. So it's a pretty safe way of doing it, as long as this list you're comfortable with. And then we export that. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to results and export this. So like I said, you want to export as a tab delimited text file. So I'm going to export that right now. And if I've been doing a good job of cleaning up my courses, it wouldn't have taken so long. So I still got a lot in there. Okay, so a lot of my course sections have leading zeros in them. So instead of it being section 1, section 2, it's section 01, section 02. When you open Excel, it likes to strip out those leading zeros, but you need those or it's going to throw your report off. So I'm just going to show you how to deal with that. So first of all, you want to rename your file extension. Just take the CSV off and create a text file and say, yeah. Okay. Then you can go ahead and open it in Excel. There we go. So it's going to give you this wizard. You're going to go ahead and say, yeah, keep it on delimited. Change it to tab if it needs to be. I think for mine, it usually defaults to semicolon. And you can see here that the section ID is still showing those leading zeros. Once it opens in Excel, it won't unless you highlight that section and change this column data format to text. That is going to be your savior in trying to keep these leading zeros in here. Okay, so now I'm just gonna whittle this file down to one course for the purpose of the demo. Let's see here. Get rid of these. And the rest of the other 16,000 or so. Okay, and you can see almost all of these data fields are full. For my processing department, previously it was exporting a name that was like the name of my course reserves department, course reserves at O'Shaughnessy Library, and it just kept getting rejected. It didn't like that. So I went back and looked at what the actual code was, and it was Digi Department Institution, or the shorthand for it. So once I fixed that, it's working. So what I did was I just hard coded that into my analytics report. So that's why I haven't had to change it here now. And then I guess the other thing I'll point out is under operation, you definitely want it to say delete. So what I would do now is go ahead and save this. I don't actually have access to the SFTP server. My developer does. So I've had him load on a file. I've had him load a file on beforehand. So hopefully this goes well. It did the first time. So I'm going to go in and we're going to imagine that I'd given him the file and he'd uploaded SFTP, or that I already had access and uploaded it and it's sitting there waiting. We can do run now. And I'm going to go back to Alma then so that we can look at monitoring the job and see what happened. So here it is at the top in my history, and it's saying completed successfully. I'll warn you that's not always the case, but we'll look through here and we'll see that, hey, we've got our one course that's deleted, and nothing else looks too bad here. So just to be sure, I'm going to copy that and search for the course. And indeed, it's gone. So you can imagine that, like you wouldn't really do that for just one course, but with a longer list, you get really efficient. So that is the basics of deleting with Course Loader. I'm going to pass this on to Peta, who's got even more details about using Course Loader with her use case.
Thank you very much, Greg. So I'm Peta Hopkins. I'm the Manager of Digital Library Services at Bond University on the Gold Coast, Australia. I'll just take a moment to acknowledge the Kombumerri clan of the Yugambeh language group as the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and work, and I'm presenting from today. Let me share my presentation with you. Make sure I choose the right one. I think that's it. Does that look right? You can see the slides, but not the presenter's mode. Good.
Looks good.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so a little bit of background first of all. We think about this in two phases, I guess. One was pre-Leganto and then post-Leganto. So my use case, I'm going to talk about cleaning up data really from the pre-Leganto stage. So in 2015, we moved to Alma. And from then until 2018, we really only used course reserves for moving physical items in and out of the reserve collection. So we didn't have any citations that were for websites or journal articles or anything like that. It was really just books and DVDs. So because of that, we had no requirement to particularly worry too much about the quality of our course records. We didn't have any retention policies about them. It was up to us to just manually create them, change dates, recycle them, delete them as we needed to. Our Leganto timeline starts in May of last year, where we had 10 courses in a pilot mode. And then in our September trimester, we moved that to 50-ish courses. And then from the beginning of this year, we've had Leganto available across the entire campus. Anyone who wants to use a list is able to do so. So we're now up in the hundreds and hundreds of reading lists. In the early days, we rolled over those old lists that we had as a starting point for instructors who were getting started with Leganto. But we didn't particularly want to keep hold of old lists and courses that were getting, a bit old and needed to have a fresh pair of eyes look at them. The introduction of Leganto really meant that we had a new retention policy about this data. In line with the content that is managed in our learning management system, we now have to retain our reading list for 2 years. So that's a little bit of background for where we're at. So in terms of data cleanup, we think about it in two phases at this stage. The end of last year, we started identifying old pre-Leganto courses and lists that had not been used at all for 2 years and wanted to get rid of those to clean up the interface for our Alma users. The process there was to generate a report in the relevant format that Greg's already described for the course loader integration. We created an integration profile, which is only for deletions. And then we went through a process of deleting the courses and the lists associated with them. Then in phase 2, which is this year, we wanted to then go back and delete all lists and courses which already have a Leganto version, if you wish, that we can use for future rollovers, and clean out old courses and lists from that pre-Leganto time. There is going to be phase 3. That's not going to arrive for us until next year, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So the data differences of pre-Leganto and Leganto that really helped us in this cleanup process were in relation to course codes. So we just used a short course code or nickname, if you like, for our courses then. With Leganto, we've now moved to a much more detailed course code that encodes some other information in it. So in the right-hand column there, you can see Psych 71608, that's the short nickname that persists from one term and year to another. We then have the year of offering, the trimester code, so SEP is for September, STD is for standard. We might also see things there like INT for intensive modes, and then a class group, which is 01. The term descriptions also, we changed our practices with Leganto. So pre-Leganto, we just used 3, standard codes that were already there in Alma and named them as January, May, and September. For Leganto, we then used 3 different codes, so term 1, term 2, and term 3, and we renamed them as January Leganto, May Leganto, and September Leganto. And that was really helpful for us to distinguish between, lists that we were looking at as to whether these were under the new mode of operation. And then in terms of the course dates that we had, pre-Leganto, as I mentioned, they were manually updated and we didn't really have any critical need to worry too much about them as being reliable or not. Post-Leganto, it is far more important to us. I've put reliable in inverted quotes there because while we rely on them and they're pretty accurate, they're not an exact indicator of when students engage with those courses. So if they're in intensive mode, the course still has the beginning of the trimester and the end of the trimester rather than the actual dates the students are engaging. So that really helped us to keep track of what we were going to do with in the next steps of cleanup. So phase 1, the criteria here was the course year had to be at least 2 years ago, so that was 2016 or earlier, and the term was in those old term codes that we use, so January, May or September. The analytics report that we used for this was based on one that University of New South Wales shared with us some time ago, and which I believe they don't use. We did some work on that to customize it for our own purposes and to make sure that it matched exactly what we needed in the file template and that it contained the data that we wanted. So for example, the operator column, we auto-populate with the word delete. So we don't have to do that post-production, if you like. We also include enough data in that file for us to be reassured when we look at it ourselves and eyeball it to make sure that we're comfortable we're not going to delete important things. So even though they're not mandatory fields, it's there for us for sanity checking. So it looked a little bit like this. You could see on the far left that column has our old short code in it. If we saw any longer codes there, that was immediately a warning that hang on, this doesn't look quite right. Towards the far right, you can see that the delete is already in that operator column. The diagram underneath just shows you how we've disabled the autumn semester 1, semester 2, which are our old terms, and you can see at the bottom of that illustration, term 1, term 2 and term 3 are now enabled. Now that we've got rid of that old data, we will probably relabel them to just January, May and September, since the Leganto bit's a bit superfluous now. Okay, so as Greg mentioned, it is possible to have multiple integration profiles to support this. So we have 3. One's for our daily course update, which is a file that's prepared for us. IT services developed an integration and they place the file on the SFTP server. It gets processed every day at 11 AM. So all the files for that go in that courses folder, which is, you can see that directory structure there, that's from our SFTP server. We have an integration profile, which is for deletes only, and we have another one which is for rollovers only, and we have corresponding folders for those on the server, and that just helps us keep track of which, minimizes our chance of errors in running a particular file with the wrong integration profile. Okay, so phase 2, this is where we wanted to get rid of more of the records that were really of no use to us at all. So the criteria here was the term is in those old term codes and that we also had a Leganto version of the list that we could use for future rollovers. We produced 2 analytics reports for this phase. And these were for manual comparison. So the first list was the rolled over lists, and then the list, a report of all of the old lists so that we could just make sure we're just getting rid of the ones we wanted to. The format for that report is identical to the one we used in phase 1. So this was much more time consuming, but it was worth it because it meant we could really clean up the Alma view for our library staff. In the interim, we now have some more robust reporting, which we use for managing rollovers, and it would have been quite nice to have that back when we were doing this because it would have minimised some of that manual comparison. My colleague Jessie Donaghy did quite a bit of work on developing those reports, and it allows us to paste in the short course codes, a big long list of them in as a filter, and it will then identify Leganto lists that we can use for rollovers. So that would have been very helpful. Okay, so phase 3 doesn't come to us until May next year, and that will be 2 years from when we had our first 10 courses come through Leganto. We're not sure of what our answers are for the criteria yet. We haven't decided whether we will delete just the lists but not the courses. and not purge them so that we can retain analytics data. We're not sure whether we will delete courses but not lists and update a report or visualization with external data for the total number of courses for that term, or whether we just abandon analytics data if it's more than 2 years old. So we have some decisions to make there. One of our KPIs, though, looks at the proportion of courses that the university is offering and how many of those have lists. So somewhere along the line, we do have to keep track of how many courses we've got, whether it's via Alma or whether it's from some external system. So we have a few questions ahead of us. Whatever it is, we will be using the same output format as previously, but the filters will vary. One of the possible scenarios, though, and I know this has been discussed on the list, so I thought I'll go into this in a bit of detail, is the idea of deleting courses which have no list. Now, Greg touched on this before about the idea of having the two reports, one that says these are all the lists, and now show me the courses that are not in that list. So for us, we would be looking at choosing years, so the year is less than 2 years from now, or a course start date is less than a particular date. And so in that analytics report section, you can see there the two lists we use would be find reading list by academic department and semester. And then the second one is called courses with no reading lists. And I'll just go to the next slide. If you want to have a look at those and get copies for yourself, the address is there. So it's in the shared community area under Bond University. And I've put them there in a folder especially for this webinar. I'll also share these slides, and those two links there with report XML means you'll be able to download the actual XML for those reports too if you prefer to get it that way. And that's it from me. So I will stop sharing. And hand over to Yuan.
Thanks, Peta. I'm going to share my screen. Can you see my screen? Yep. Can you see my notes? You can also, oh, great.
Looks perfect. Looks perfect.
Yep. Thank you. So, hello everyone. I'm Yuan from UNSW Sydney Library. And today I'm going to talk about the Alma and Leganto course cleanup jobs we do at UNSW. So this is the outline of today's talk. Firstly, I will give an overview of the Leganto implementation at UNSW. I will also talk about how we load the courses into Alma and Leganto. Then I will talk about the two jobs we do to clean up the courses. The first one is to delete the courses dropped from the daily feed, and the other one is to delete the courses without reading lists at the end of each term. Okay, here is a brief overview of the history of Leganto at UNSW. We did our pilot in semester 1 and semester 2, 2016. And for the pilot, library staff worked with the faculties to find a group of academics who expressed interest in using Leganto. We have also received great support from our Moodle team. So we have the environment set up and we can test the interoperability between Moodle and Leganto. For semester 1, 2016, we got 10 published reading lists. And for semester 2, 2016, we got 23rd published reading lists. So it all went on well for the pilot. So we decided to roll out Leganto to the university in semester 1, 2017. And Leganto was well adopted as it fits the self-service model that we actively promoted at UNSW. Starting from 2019, UNSW Sydney commenced the 3+, which is 3 10-week terms plus 1 summer session. So here on the screen, you can see the number of courses we have in CMS and the number of courses which have the published reading lists for term 3 2019. Just give you an idea on the number of courses we have for each term. Okay. So on this slide, I will provide an overview of our course loading process. So at UNSW, we load our courses to Alma daily using the Alma course loader job. We use the same course feed files that are loaded to Moodle. So this is based on the two reasons. One is that we are a downstream system pulling data from the source of truth. So we try to reuse existing data instead of creating our own set of data. Another reason is to make sure that the LTI link from the Moodle course to Leganto reading list works as expected, because both Moodle and Leganto have the same course ID. The feed files are available for us at 2 a.m. daily. So we have the script to fetch the file to our FTP server. We have a shell script runs at 3 a.m. daily to transform the course feed file to CSV format, which can be used as an input file to the Alma course loader job. We schedule the Alma course loader job runs daily at 8 a.m. to load those courses into Alma. So this course loading job runs until the end of the term. This is because the course could be updated at any time of the term, so we have to keep it running for the whole term. I just want to mention that at UNSW, we do not use a course loader for the rollover or cleanup. This is because of the limitation of our CMS Moodle. Our CMS does not provide a persistent identifier for the same course in different terms. Therefore, we cannot do the mapping between these courses in new and old terms. So in the following slides, I will start talking about our course cleanup jobs. Okay, the first task we do is to delete the courses that are dropped from the feed. This is done daily. So sometimes the courses are created by mistake, and sometimes the duplicate courses are created in the feed. So once such courses are identified and removed from the feed file, library needs to clean them up in Alma. This is to reduce the risk for instructor or library staff to associate their reading list to the wrong courses. So we developed a shell script to compare the current and the previous day's course feed files and send an email to report on the courses that are dropped from the feed. The scripts runs every morning, and my team checks this email in their monitoring tasks. So if the course does not have any associated reading lists, we just manually remove them from Alma directly. And if the course already has associated reading lists, we will contact our colleagues in the academic engagement department to confirm if the reading list can be reassociated to the correct course before we delete them from Alma. Okay, the second job is a housekeeping job to delete Alma courses that do not have any associated reading lists. And there are two reasons for doing this. The first reason is to reduce the number of courses in Alma and improve the performance. And the second reason is it will make it faster and easier for library staff to find a course in Alma and for the users to find a course in Leganto. So when we do this, we perform this task 2 months after the end of the teaching period of each term. So that's 60 days after the end of the teaching period. This is a pretty seamless process, which does not affect the staff's work and does not affect academics and instructors in the university. So this is how we normally do it. 2 weeks before the scheduled cleanup date, we notify the library staff about the cleanup tasks we are going to do. And we run this process in sandbox environment 1 week after the notification. This is to identify any potential issues and get estimation on the time required for this job. Then we run the script in production environment on the scheduled date and report result back to the library staff. For example, how many courses have been removed from Alma and how many courses are left in Alma. And to do this, my colleague created a Perl script to achieve this by using the Alma course API. I will talk more about this in my next slide. So here on the left-hand side, you can see the process of how the script works. It firstly searches all the courses for the given term and retrieve the course ID. So it can use the course ID to retrieve all the associated reading lists. Then it checks the number of reading lists. If the number is 0, that means no reading list associated to the course. Then the script will call Alma API to delete the course. Otherwise, it will keep the course in Alma. After everything has been done, it sends email to us reporting on the running results. So on the left-hand side, I've listed some of the Alma API we used for this script. As you can see, retrieve courses or retrieve reading lists. Or there should be another one to remove the course from the Alma. So at the bottom, this is a command we use to run the job. We use a term code as a parameter and the environment as another parameter. As I said, we run it in UAT first, then we run it in production. So for term 1, 2019, there were 1,595 courses in the feed, and we use this script to remove 1,289 courses successfully. And the script runs for about 40 to 50 minutes. So this is just to give you an idea on the number of courses we normally have, and how much time the script will need to run. Yep, that's it. Thank you very much. Now I'm handing over to Jamen. Stop sharing. Okay.
All right, thank you. Now let me get set up. Let's see here. Okay. And we want to go here. All right, everybody see my slide? Okay, good. Thank you for being here for this session. My name is Jamen McGranahan. I'm from Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm the Associate Director of Library Technology and Digital Services here at Vanderbilt. It's a lot of words to say that I'm one of the leads in server and systems management for the library, including Alma, Primo VE, and Leganto. Today, I just want to talk a little bit about what we do for cleaning up courses that do not have reading lists, which all of the others I've already talked about. To give you a little background, last year we migrated to Alma and Primo VE from the Circe Symphony system. And at the same time, we implemented Leganto as a course reading list tool. And during implementation, we imported a lot of our old course data, course reserves that were in our previous system. So we had a lot of old data that we needed to weed out and remove. And before I go through the whole script, I do want to recognize Eduardo Perito from the University of Miami Libraries. He actually did a presentation at Illumina 2019 in Atlanta, Georgia, on this very issue. His presentation was called Leganto Maintenance, Deleting Courses Using Alma API. And I've put the GitHub code here, and I'll share the slides after the presentation. Basically, he details everything that I'm showing you today, but it also gave me an opportunity to mess with Python, because that was one of my goals for this year, is to learn more and use Python. So why is this needed? If you have an automatic course loader like what we do, you could have hundreds or even thousands of courses without reading lists. These are courses that are automatically generated and that are sitting there that are not doing anything, just taking up space. Our course loader runs every morning, and so we get new courses almost daily. Excuse me. And this has resulted in hundreds of courses since 2018 that are not used and no reading lists are attached. So our thinking is removing this old course data that has no reading list seems to be the easiest thing to do right off the hand. And we do not roll over courses right now. It wasn't something that we even thought of. And we are short on staff and we don't have a lot of free time. So for us, using the method presented at Illumina 2019 seemed to be the best option. Now there are some prerequisites for using the scripts that we have. You got to have some API keys. I highly recommend having two separate API keys, one that points to your sandbox, one that points to production. This way you can test it on the sandbox first and then run it against production. You would also need Python 3. There is a Python 2 out there, but I haven't tested Python 2 against this script, but I know it works with Python 3. It can be either locally installed on a machine, like what I'm going to show you today, or it can run on a server by itself. Now, if you do want to run it locally, I recommend using a Python development environment like Thonny. It's thonny.org. It's a free utility, but it really helps in seeing what the script is doing and how it runs. And there are several Python packages that are needed, and I got those listed here. But let me get to the demo so you can actually see what it looks like. Just a second. All right. And go here. All right. Can you see my script? Okay. Now this is Thonny, like I mentioned earlier. And as you can see here, I've documented it quite a bit because I fully believe in documentation. I also put who had originally created this. And this particular script only will remove courses that do not have reading lists because we wanted to keep those courses that did have reading lists. So that's what this one focuses on. There are three main APIs that are used in this script. There's get courses, get reading lists, and then of course delete course. And then I put down here how this script runs. Basically you launch Python with the name of the script, and then this is your search code. It can be anything, but we have a pattern where we have the fiscal year, so like 2018. F is for fall semester. S will be spring semester. And then there's a .1 and a dot and so forth and so on. But this will get all of the courses from the fall of 2018 if I want to do that. Now I did revise the script a little bit so that it generates two different files. One is a course report. It basically gives you a report of what courses were found, what courses had reading lists, and then what courses were actually deleted. And then the second report gives you that same information, but gives you more details. So it helps with troubleshooting. Currently, this script runs 100 courses at a time. So it processes them and then it does another 100. So it does take time if you have a lot of courses to go through. And so you can see what it looks like here. The import. If you're familiar with Python, these are the various modules that you will need for this particular script. API keys, this is where you would put that at. And then this is where we define the different log and report paths and the names. Let me show you what a report looks like. Okay. All right, can you see the report? Okay. This is a report a script that I ran earlier. I was looking for 2018, F for fall semester, .1, .b. So every course that begins with that showed up here. So notice I get all the various courses and the course IDs. Now, if I scroll down, out of all of those courses, it only found one that had a reading list. Okay, so you see that here. So that one will not be deleted. But if you come down here, you can see these numbers are the actual course ID numbers that match up here. So that's what that report looks like. All right. Now, let me go to, just a second here. Okay. All right, do you all have any questions about what I have discussed? I do plan to put this on the developers network so that other institutions can use it.
Yeah, so we're all done. So if you have any questions, now is a good time to ask them. Looks like we've got some time, and we can also check the chat, and you can submit them that way. It looks like somebody asked about sharing the analytics reports, and Peta's posted that in the presentation and also here in the group chat. I believe when we post these for posterity, that we'll be putting them somewhere where we can include extra documentation and things along these lines. So we'll package that together and send that out onto Leganto L. Any other questions? Okay, going once, going twice. Sold. You've sold me on shutting down this webinar. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and thank you to all the presenters. The presenters, could you hang on the line a little bit, and we'll talk about next steps. Otherwise, look for the postings on Leganto L in a week or two, I would guess. So long for now.